All right. Okay, great. Well, thank you everyone for joining. We're going to be discussing what's on our meeting minutes. And overall, we'll be talking about kind of what we've done so far with Prismatic, a little bit of a release plan, and decide how we're going to move forward, and then figure out how we can effectively work together to get there, right? To start out, let's recap a little bit of our work so far. So, essentially, we've kickstarted our repository. We've closed a bunch of pull requests, and it's general consensus that we're focusing on the sharding client in the beginning, rather than the protocol changes, as that's going to be a completely different project, right? So, overall, I think we have some pretty good entry points for people to join in and to start actually, the sharding client. Um, we basically we basically reached the point where people are able to call out into the validator manager contract automatically through the client and get selected as a validator. So we're at the point where people, are selected as collators, and they have to process transactions in and basically create collations that are then going to be added into the shards. So that's a really solid starting point for what we've done so far. I think that there are definitely some things to do with the validator manager contract in the beginning, and to make sure all that is streamlined. But does anyone want to talk about kind of where we've been so far? Like, do you guys think that we're on the right track? Should we be focusing on something else? Just want to hear your thoughts.
I can quickly mention my progress on this transaction generator for testing.
Sure.
So I'm working on this tool sort of just for ease of seeing how things will work with sharding. It's the transaction generator. I've shared my design for that. So far, it's working in the sense that it will create some accounts, say 100. Then it will fund those accounts, or distribute funds to those, and soon it will start transacting between those. So the theory is that we can generate 100 accounts. In theory, as time goes on, those will be cross shards transactions. So we can really see that kind of functionality working a lot easier than going into Web3 or whatever and doing it manually. So I haven't pushed out my code yet, but that's sort of where I am. It's not sending transactions yet, but it's almost there. Probably another week or so, and I'll send it for review.
Perfect. And Enrique has worked on the Solidity contract. It's like really good initial implementation. I think obviously the only things that are missing are a strong unit test to be able to catch edge cases, and possibilities where we might not have covered them. So before we dive into some of these details, let's take a look at the other Google Doc, right? So let's see if you guys can still see my screen. But I've been kind of using this doc as our overall guide and implementation to Prismatic Labs, like, guest sharding. And in here, I guess basically I'm taking bits and pieces of um of all the different Ethereum research blog posts, taking bits and pieces of kind of what we've done in Golang, and also explaining how this is going to work in practice and what we're going to deliver to the public, right? So I came up with a little release plan for how we can go about this. So if you guys go down to the roadmap area, I structured it around three major releases, right? And like two of these are really abstract and kind of further away. But something that I think we can definitely get there soon as a team is something called the Ruby release. So the Ruby release is going to be the first local AlphaNet for people to to run on their computers. So essentially, it will what we're going to deliver is people are going to be able to clone our repo. They're going to be able to launch a Geth node, start a sharding client that reaches into their account and allows them to start depositing and processing transactions through the transaction generator that Preston has, right? So the components of the local AlphaNet will be as follows. So we're going to have a simple archival sharding client. That means that the sharding client will not be stateless. It'll download whatever Merkle branches of the state that it'll require, um, and it will deploy a validator manager contract to a locally running Geth node, just like we do right now, right? Aside from that, the other functionality that we'll need is the ability to deposit ETH into the validator manager contract through the command line. So, give the users the ability to select, okay, I want to deposit ETH, I want to withdraw my ETH after a certain period or such. And then after that, we'll also need a simple command line util to simulate pending transactions of different types posted to the local TX pool, right? So that's what Preston's been working on. And that's going to be really important for people to be able to visualize this. Another tool that we'll need is the ability to through the command line easily inspect kind of what's going on in the shards, and just have some simple tool to see what's going on either through logs or simple ASCII text of what's going on throughout the shards. So basically, we want to give people a taste of what sharding will look like, and how it's basically gonna increase the throughput of the blockchain, and kind of give them an understanding of how they can participate as validators, how they can start becoming collator processors, and just generally deliver this to the community. I think this would add tremendous value, and I don't think we're that far away from being able to do this, save for some security considerations and testing situations, right? Um, so that's kind of what I have in mind for the Ruby release. The ETA we can discuss as a team, but I don't think we're more than a few months away. And I think we're way less than a few months away. Um, the next step is going to be the Sapphire release. So this is going to be a really big deal. This is going to be the release on the Ropsten testnet, right? So what this will involve is making sure that the Ruby release is polished enough from a security standpoint to be live on an actual Ethereum testnet. And we also have to do a lot of different fuss tests and interesting tests to make sure that multiple validators processing collations through the on-chain VMC and like different lag time and issues with bandwidth don't come into play here. We need to make sure those are really good and stress test them against DDoS attacks. So this will be more of a stronger research effort that will require a lot more external feedback outside of our team, and bring in different actors to make sure this is really robust, right? Aside from that, what we're going to be working on concurrently or soon after that is going to be part 2 of the Sapphire release, which will focus on basically implementing the first cross-shard transaction mechanism via a receipt system, right? So I'm going to be outlining this in the Beyond Phase 1 section of this document. But the idea is that we want to get this ready to run on a local private network as we did in the Ruby release. So this is going to be another major change. It's going to introduce a lot of complexity, and it's going to be also a big team effort. So that's why I think initially we should just focus on getting the Ruby release ready for Ropsten testnet and getting a validator manager contract that's deployed to the Ropsten testnet, right? And then obviously the final release is going to be the Diamond release, which is where we're going to reconcile the best parts of all the previous releases and actually launch a full-featured, cross-shard transaction mechanism on the Ethereum mainnet, right? So this is obviously going to be the most difficult and time-consuming release on the horizon. We're going to need all hands on deck from all members of the Ethereum community to get this done. But I think let's take it one step at a time and let's work through milestones. And to start, I think the Ruby release would be a pretty solid place to begin, right? And we just want to give people a taste of what sharding will look like and give them something that works on their local computers. Does anyone have any thoughts on this or want to add anything?
I have a question about the mainnet,
Sure.
or even testnet. Since we're not the only team working on sharding implementations, is there going to be collaboration with those other clients, or are we going to be sharing contract ABI using the same deployed one, or how? Is there even a strategy yet that we're going to be all working together when it comes time to launch this in any capacity?
Sure. Yes, especially if like PyVM team is planning on having the similar timeline. I think we'll absolutely need to have the same, at least for the testnet. It might not be as important because we just want to get people, multiple validators trying sharding out. So it would be, ideally it would be great that everyone would use the same ABI. And in the mainnet, obviously, everyone we should obviously all have the same ABI. Um, yeah, I think we'll definitely at that point start collaborating more with the other teams. And it wouldn't hurt to start, to start trying to make our Solidity implementation more robust with tests and try to push that to be the main contract, right? Um, because I think whoever has the most robust contract will obviously be the one that everyone's going to use. And if it's deployed to the same address, it's just a matter, like we'll have the same Golang bindings. It shouldn't be a big deal. So yes, I think that's a good point. So we'll probably collaborate with PyVM and talk to any other teams. Another thing that I wanted to mention to you guys is that it would be really, really great for us to collaborate with the actual Geth core team. I'm getting in touch with a few of the core developers for Geth and just let them know about kind of what we're working on and make sure that they don't have any major breaking changes on the horizon upstream that are going to ruin our workflow, which I really doubt, but it's something to keep in mind, right? So what do you guys think about the Ruby release? So, just to recap, we'll have the sharding client, the VMC, the transaction simulator, and a simple tool for users to begin depositing ETH.
I have another thought on collaborating with like PyVM and
Sure.
others for the contract. Maybe we should consider breaking out the validator management contract into its own repository where we're kind of all on the same page, because we have our own flavor or version of it and they have their own. So it's inevitable that when the time comes, we're going to have conflicts. Like maybe everything works exactly the same, but the methods are different. So it might be worthwhile to start talking to them, see if we can agree to break it out of both of our repositories and put it into a new one, or maybe we can take ownership and break it out, and then they can use ours or whatever. Just thinking like in the future, it's going to be a problem if we don't agree on the same contract.
Cool. So do you think we should start doing that now? Like even if we don't have like a strong unit test for our VMC. I mean I don't even know if they do for theirs, to be honest.
Yeah.
Yeah, but they do it in Viper also. So,
Yes, that's right. They do it in Viper. Um, okay. So I
but
think
yeah, I've been looking through some pull requests there and suggesting some changes. So, but it's pretty much equal now. But one thing I'm really worried about is because I only seen one article in archive describing Casper, and none of these things is implemented yet in the contract. Like we don't have any. The 2/3 validator signing is not there.
sure.
The staking also is not there, and the random number generator. I don't really know how it's gonna work, that thing. Like to select the dynasties and stuff like that. So it
So
would
I
be nice to
haven't
have a nice a nice article so we can have the theory there and just implement the contract based on that.
Sure, Enrique. I think we can add that to the implementation doc and have the section on the validator manager contract include all of those different things. Um, I think then we can actually just port this over to a GitHub README or to to a strong markdown document that includes all of this. Yeah, like they definitely don't have that implemented yet. And in terms of random number generation, I was speaking to some people and I think that we could consider bit voting schemes, which are going to be pretty good for like a single source randomness to be able to determine the validators. So we can take a look at bit voting schemes. There's a trade-off in speed from them, but we can try to see how we can do that in Solidity. So okay, that's a good point. So then okay, for immediate action items, why don't we then create a VMC repo, port over our Solidity code over there, and and then like start, yeah, and basically just start mentioning these things that Enrique mentioned in our Google Doc that need to be worked on, such as writing up the theory of random number generation. I'll try to get a hold of some of the people working on PyAVM to see if we can collaborate on this, because I think this would be a great collaboration instead of because they have a lot of knowledge that, about their Viper implementation that we don't have, and we have a lot of knowledge about ours that they don't have.
So we may be able to put our Solidity contract and their Viper contract next to each other and have them run against the same tests. So at least you can assert like, okay, these do the same thing, and when we're going to use them, they're going to work exactly the same. Even if they're like they want to use Viper, we would use Solidity. Like that's fine.
Yeah.
But the underlying bytecode and stuff should operate the same.
Yeah, that's true.
And I don't think they have any other major methods, like very different methods than what we have, right?
Yeah, I think it's pretty much the same.
Yeah.
Cool. All right. Yeah. So in terms of a release schedule, do you guys think that we're around maybe 2 months away from being able to deliver kind of what was outlined in the Ruby release? I mean, I feel like the bottleneck here is going to be making the VMC robust with all the staking methods. Because it seems like Preston is, like you're doing a pretty good progress on the pending transaction simulator, and the rest of the stuff shouldn't be that complex, right? most of the work and the theory will be in the VMC implementation.
Well, I think if we're just doing like sort of the happy path, 2 months sounds okay. But if we need to start considering like when collators go away or they're selected but they don't act on it, or even malicious collators, like that's going to be a lot more thinking. And same thing with the Casper stuff. Like we don't really have that on our. We haven't really talked about it at all at this point, so it's kind of hard to quantify how much time it's going to take.
Okay,
and also
great.
we need to implement the create opcode, right? And those, what's the progress on those things? I don't really know.
Sure. So the opcodes for sharding, we also basically need to talk about edge cases and malicious actors. Cool. All right, so then I guess that's going to be an immediate action item. As a team, we can discuss more of this and probably create probably write this down in our reference spec, or try to communicate as well with the PyEVM team, and then we'll have a better idea. Okay, so how do you guys think we can best manage this? Would you guys rather have kind of Google Doc sprints? Would you guys rather have like GitHub issues where we have conversations on there? How do you guys think it's best to like work through this checklist, right? So that we can all have the same amount of knowledge sharing and get through it effectively.
My opinion is that Google Docs is great for these big, multiple page things where we need a lot of collaboration, a lot of comments that are really easy to process and then dismiss afterwards. Whereas like GitHub is more like we already know what we want and we're going to put it there, and then if it's not clear, then we ask questions. So like going forward, I think once we've sort of identified granular tasks, they should go into GitHub, no matter how small or large. Like if they're too big, we can break them up, but we need some visibility on who's working on what and where we could use help from new participants, because I know there's a lot of interest besides us. People would be happy to help, so we just need to put that out there on GitHub, where it's better suited, better suited than a Google Doc.
So you think that maybe porting over our reference spec to GitHub would be a good idea to get collaborators involved, because we're gonna have there's a section in there that's current progress and kind of what's needed. So I think porting that over to Markdown as soon as possible will be really effective. So
that's in the Sharding Implementation doc. Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah. Obviously, there's going to be a lot of stuff that's going to be a work in progress, such as like there's a lot of research stuff near the end where I discuss, we're planning on discussing a lot of the things that are on the Ethereum research blog posts, such as like, delayed state execution, like the data availability problem, But basically, we want this doc to give an idea of what's needed,
Yeah.
and have people have a really, really solid place to start and to know where exactly we need help, right? Aside from that, we'll point them over to look at our issues, and we can frame our issues around four major spokes. So I think the first spoke is going to be obviously your pending transaction simulator, Preston. The next spoke is going to be the VMC. The next spoke is going to be the actual client, and the other spoke is going to be Casper research, and the final one is going to be um, the final one is going to be, I think, actually being able to run the whole system end to end. So we can kind of split our issues up into those types of categories and have people understand that this is what they can work on. So I'm gonna write that down.
But those seem more like labels or like higher level I guess
Labels.
projects, whereas like issues would be like add opcode X to this to support this functionality.
Cool. So how can we, so I mean, how can we create kind of like labeled projects? I think GitHub has a project manager, but I don't know how popular that is. Should we do that? How do you think it's best to go about doing that so people make sure that they know that something is categorized into like the EVM, you know?
Oh yeah, this I'm looking at it now, and I think I haven't used this before, but I think it like automatically applies labels to issues or whatever. But we could like you just identified 3 or maybe 4 critical components. Well, we could turn those into projects and then have tasks under them, and then we can. It'd be if someone wanted to see, well, how far away are we? You always say, is it going to be done in 2 months? Well, we can look at this board, like Kanban board, and say, okay, well, this is what we know we still have to do, and what we know is done, and based on that, we can estimate, this could take this much time. So I think we should try it for sure.
Okay, cool. So I think there are like 4 major projects in this case, and you said that you can, when you create tasks, it can automatically kind of create an issue that's labeled around that task.
Yeah, I think that's what happens is that the tasks are really GitHub issues, and with an automated Kanban is the type of template you can use. When you change the label to done, it moves it along on the board, and you can really see that it's where the whole project is.
Cool. Sure. So we can first point people to our README, so they can have a better idea of like what are the major implementation aspects, and then they'll be able to look at our issues that are going to be based on our Kanban board and understand exactly kind of where they can get started, right?
Yeah, in terms of the README, maybe if you're looking from an outsider perspective, if you land on our GitHub page, it shows the README for Go Ethereum.
Right.
And it doesn't mention sharding, so maybe like we can add at the very top, like click here for sharding details or something, or kind of like at a high level explain what this is.
Sure. Do you mean modify the Go Ethereum README temporarily at least?
Yeah, in our fork, and then if we were to merge back in, we could take that that block out. But I think that's quite a ways away, so maybe it's a year away. So in the midterm, we need to have it needs to be clear what we're doing for new people and to get, I think, people more interested. Otherwise, it just looks kind of like a fork, and they have to dig to find out what's going on.
Right. I mean, do you think we could like, I guess like make the README a little bit more robust this week, at least for new collaborators, and then just like the sections that are not done, just add a to-do and port that over to Markdown?
Yes.
Cool. That sounds good. Yeah, because I think having that sooner rather than later and just having the sections that are not filled in as to-dos or work in progress, I think that would be really effective. Because yeah, a lot of people have been asking like, oh, I want to get started on this. I've been reading some of the sharding FAQ, but it's not really aligned with kind of what you guys are doing specifically. So I guess that's going to be the point of the Markdown document. Okay, cool. So that sounds good to me.
Yeah. So for the Ruby release, the aim is to have the validator manager contract like you specified in the document with the 2/3 signing and staking and everything. Or maybe, I think it would be easy to break down this thing in two, do like with the current validator managed contract, which doesn't have any of these things, but it can operate in as long as no one cheats. If every validator behaves okay, it's going to progress.
I think for Ruby and the local, it's acceptable to say everyone's honest, and then
okay, and then you can change the validator contract later.
Yeah.
Sure. So Enrique, can you maybe clarify a little bit? So you mean just foregoing a little bit of a few of the security considerations for purposes of the Ruby release?
Yeah, for the Ruby, yeah, that's it. Or
cool.
Or break it into, I don't know.
Yeah, the local, like a local proof of concept is like you're just showing how sharding might work, and then on the Rammstein testnet, it's saying like, here it is, now try to break it. So
okay.
When we get to that point, it needs to be, more bulletproof. But for a local, like getting things working is really to do a demo and like to show that how it's going to work.
Right.
For the most common use cases.
Right. So I'm basically just trying to get to the point where how can we deliver something that's more like a demo, right? Because I think that's what the community needs, and from that standpoint, we just how can we get to the first milestone where we can actually package something up, release it on Reddit, the different Gitter channels, and get people excited about it, right? And then we can make it very clear that this is only for local testnet, and that there are still certain key pieces of security considerations missing. So, I mean, we'll at least need staking though, right, Preston?
Staking in the sense that your stake can be slashed.
Right. Well, I mean, will we at least need that or not really for the Ruby release?
I don't know. It's hard to say. Because
no, I think it's okay to do without.
Yeah, it's like we're if we can assume that everyone's going to participate and be honest, then there's nothing will ever be slashed. But yeah, I think it's only needed for beyond Ruby, like before it gets to any testnet. I think that's when we'll need it.
Okay, great, cool. So we'll just make it really clear that the Ruby release does not include these functionality. Perfect. Aside from that, I think the way to really do some community outreach would be to, once we get this packaged up, we can release it on the Ethereum Reddit. We can release on the different Gitter channels. I guess communicate through the Geth team, and I also have a bunch of people that are, that are founders of companies and of pretty big companies in the Ethereum community they mentioned they're pretty happy to kind of tweet about us, spread the word of kind of our Ruby release, and get that rolling, right? I guess just getting people excited about the fact that sharding is actually in the works is a really good place for Prysmatic to start. Yeah, aside from that, I think that'll also get more people excited, and we'll probably get more collaborators, and having a really clear Kanban issue system that's categorized into labels will be really effective. So one of the other things I wanted to talk to you guys about is how can we effectively work on somebody else's PR, right? So I mean, for Preston, we had a bunch of these scenarios where I kind of have to create my own branch and then push to your branch, and then you have to like take a look at that branch, approve it into your fork, and then fork it into the get sharding fork, right? So there's a lot of multi-step processes that go in here, and a lot of kind of if we need something changed, it just becomes a little bit harder to implement. So do you guys like the current workflow, or is there anything that could be improved in the sense of how we merge into master? What do you guys think?
Well, one solution is to do pull requests that are as small as possible, so that way there's less like conflicting things. Like if you're working on something and you need to, it also depends on regenerating the contract ABI. Well, chances are somebody else needs to regenerate that too. So do that separately, submit that, and then your changes are independent of those, ABI code or whatever. If it's like say I'm working on a new interface and you want to start depending on that for your thing, but mine isn't quite done yet. Well, I think it's fine to merge in my changes while it's still in review, and then mention in the pull request, say, please review pull request 40 before this one, and you can also include like a link to show the difference between my pull request and your pull request. So if someone wants to review your changes only, that's possible. If anyone has any ideas how to make this easier, I'm not sure. Like, this is pretty basic Git flow. I don't know if GitHub has support to say like base my changes off of that pull request so that you're only reviewing my changes. I don't think it's possible.
Sure. Okay. So I guess we can just show it. Just sending you directly the link to the diff, I think, could make life easier. Okay, cool. So let's just stick to that then.
If it's really becoming a pain, we can talk about it again, maybe with some specific examples. But sure. In theory, like if we're using small pull requests, it shouldn't matter. And I think that if you really need something in there soon and the other person's unavailable, it would be okay to merge in their changes and sort of supersede their pull requests, whereas you merged in their changes in your pull request, so effectively theirs is merged in too, and you can close that one. That original author still gets credit because they're signed to those commits. So it should never be any blockers with asynchronous Git flow.
Okay. Sure. Yeah, I mean, if it really, really becomes a pain, I guess that's mostly because of like somebody waiting on an interface or something like that. But in the end, like just merging for the time being and then asking for a review, I think is a pretty good solution to that. So, okay. So then let's talk about specific action items moving forward and how we can best go about it, right? So Preston is going to work on the transaction generator tool. So like let's just write that. Get task. Preston gives generator tool. I'm gonna be working right now on getting a PR started in the upstream Go Ethereum project, so that they can actually give us functionality to subscribe to transactions that are pending. So because that's basically what we need before we can actually start proposing transactions in the collations. So that's going to be really, really crucial, and it's going to be, I'll definitely need you guys' help on this. So once I start the PR, we can all comment on that. We can kind of try to get that off the ground as soon as possible. So Enrique, I think it would be really great if you could help us out on maybe discussing some of the 2/3 signing and staking in the spec, and maybe not going too much into detail, but just writing out in the Google Doc that we won't really have it in the Ruby release, but here's maybe some ideas of how this could work. Aside from that, like just I guess also maybe starting a new repo for the VMC under Prysmatic Labs. I can give you some permissions to be able to do that, or I can just start it and invite you as an owner. So starting a new repo with the VMC, and I'll coordinate with the PyVM team. So,
but then we're gonna put the test there also in this repo. This new repo.
Cool. Oh yeah, the Go test or Solidity?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, Go test, and then we include it in the main repository as a submodule or something like that.
Cool.
Is it the best way to do it? I don't know.
I think so. We can. Yeah, I think that should be fine.
Okay.
Sure. Sorry, can you repeat can you guys repeat that again? So you said that you're asking if we can have the Go test in the joint repo?
Yeah.
Yeah, like we would create a repo with our Go test against our contract. The question is, or maybe it's a new question, is how can we use the same test to run against the Viper code? And then the other question was like, then how do we use this in our sharding client? And the answer there was just to include it as a submodule. I think there's a lot of examples of us using other third-party dependencies, so it would just be the same process.
Okay, great. So, okay,
But
great. So
it will be a bit weird to include the Python test into the Go implementation. No.
You mean like for the testing the contract?
Yeah, I mean, so to run the Go sharding implementation, you have to download the submodule, and then the submodule includes a bunch of Python code and Viper code and
yeah, like including that in the Prismatic Labs repo, that would be kind of weird. Like if it's inside the sharding folder and we have it as a submodule, and then there's like Python code in there, that would be awesome. Yeah,
Well,
that would just look really strange.
I don't think it needs to be a submodule. Like it doesn't need to be a submodule in our repository. It would just be a Go import of an external third-party thing.
So it would just be like import github.com Prismatic Lab / like VMC or something like that. Right?
Yeah, exactly. And
Whole different
VMC / whatever, and then we can have access to that code from there.
okay. Yeah.
So yeah, we can do that. So Sylvan is not here, but I guess his major project is mostly adding the notes on the changes necessary to the EVM. So I think we definitely need to talk about this more, because so what exactly do we need to modify about the EVM to get it ready for the Ruby release? Um, Also, one of the things that I'm still not very clear on is that the documentation around sharding around the internet specifies that phase one will not require a hard fork, and that it won't require like it'll be done through the validator manager contract. However, aren't we changing the structure of blocks, like the protocol primitive for blocks, like in our implementation?
But also we're changing like when we create a contract, it has to be. We need to specify where to go, right? With the create with the salt, I think. Let me see the.
I actually think that you guys are right about having it as a submodule. It looks like all of the vendor libraries are actually checked in. I thought they were automatically imported, but
I think they're imported by duct tape. You know that library that helps you manage vendor libraries.
I'm not familiar with it.
Sure. So I think Go Ethereum uses a library called duct tape. It's spelled like this. So we can take a look at how they do that. I think they have a duct tape file where it automatically downloads all the dependencies as submodules. But I mean, we can take a look at that. Sorry, Enrique, could you repeat a little bit more about what you were saying before about how?
Yeah, I was trying to find the pull request that Sylvain did, but I think it's closed already.
Oh, okay, okay. Yeah, I'm just thinking like like we're gonna have to modify protocol primitives anyways. So I mean, it won't matter for the Ruby release, but that basically signifies I will need a hard fork, right?
Well, is it a breaking change to add add new fields? Like if you were submitting a transaction with new properties on it, would it break old clients or would it still?
Oh yeah, I mean it would definitely require all miners to like adopt that change. So like if you change the actual structure of a block, for example, right? That's something that needs to be reached by consensus through like an EIP process and like and like everyone will need to adopt that. Like that basically requires a hard fork. If you modify a protocol primitive such as a block, um so there's not as much documentation on how blocks exactly are gonna look in this new sharding scheme. So that's something we can explore more with Sylvan. But we can definitely have that conversation through tasks in our Kanban board on GitHub. So we'll be doing more work on that. Cool. And then Terrence, are you still there? Terrence, can you hear us? So I think the other things that need to be done are like making sure the entry points and launching the sharding client are like intuitive for people. So making sure that like people have a simple entry point where they can run this like get shard. They don't need that many command line flags. It's like straightforward, and they can immediately start staking. I mean, like depositing ETH, withdrawing ETH, and start seeing the results of this. So that's also another project in our task wheel. And just making sure that the user experience of this is like pretty simple and enough for a demo. So, I would love to work with this with anyone that's interested.
Hey, sorry that I was on mute earlier, but yeah, I can totally do that.
Sure, yeah. If you wanna help out on that aspect, or if you want to
Sure.
work on any of these other aspects, just wondering kind of what you'd be interested in.
No, that sounds totally interesting, and I'm definitely willing to do it.
So, really, let's.
Can we mention or talk about documentation
Sure.
or lack thereof? Because we haven't outlined any tests for that yet.
Any tests for what aspect?
I mean, a task to do. Like we need to,
Yes.
make this really clear what we're doing, at least for our own benefit, so that we're all on the same page. But we need to, like you said, outline as many things as we can, and if there's something that we know we need to document but haven't yet, just make it to do, and maybe some volunteers will pick up on those components. But I think we have a good start on the Google Doc, and we can sort of flesh that out over this week. And whatever is not done, we'll put as a to-do and merge in Markdown.
Sure. So what do you guys think about this then? So yeah, like getting the doc as robust as possible this week, and then from there taking the major points of the doc, turning them into like big projects on GitHub, assigning tasks to them based on what we think is necessary, and then like having that as a very clear kind of like single source of truth for the team, so that we can all like know exactly what needs to be done, right?
Yeah, I'm going to link the doc here. If I think a good way to work on this is to go look at that doc and highlight a section that you want to work on, and then put a comment there and say, I'm going to work on this week or by this time, so that we can like sort of self-volunteer working on those components. And then I think by Friday or by next weekend, we can get this all into GitHub as much as possible. Yeah, and like kind of outline any questions or anything we need to do in the Google Doc while it makes sense, and then merge it into GitHub for maximum visibility.
I like that. And then I think once the doc is pretty clear, then we can just really flesh out the tasks on the project manager. Sure. So I guess that sounds good to me. And Nishant, are you there? Can you hear us?
Yeah, I can hear you guys.
Cool. I was wondering, like what would you be interested in kind of contributing to, and what part of this would you like to get involved in?
I could like work with Terrence with improving the UX, adding the enhancement. So maybe so people can add in the 100 ETH for staking or not.
Sure.
Sure.
Cool. Yeah, it would be cool if, I mean, ideally, I would imagine that we would have something like a when you launch Geth and there's a console that pops up and you can like, you can specify like, oh, I want like a REPL pops up, or you can pop in like, oh, I want to deposit 100 ETH, I want to withdraw my ETH. Very simple commands like that would be really nice. Obviously that's like not necessary. We can just do it from the start. We can do like Geth shard deposit. So yeah, because one of the things that we mentioned with Preston is that we don't want to throw people off guard that like the sharding client is gonna start taking ether from their store, from their account.
Okay, good.
So just kind of making it so that people have the option to like opt, to like put in their ether or not.
Sure.
The one question, when a user wants to withdraw, do they how like does there need to be like an advance notice, or is it like after each collation, after each like period that they process collation, do they like should we give them the option to withdraw, and can they exit the validator set immediately?
I think you can withdraw at any time. I don't feel 100% confident on
Yeah,
that,
I
but
think, I think you should have the option to withdraw.
Yeah, yeah, I
Right
think.
after a period ends. Okay, cool. All right, team. So I guess that'll wrap things up. That's basically all that I think we needed to talk about. I guess the main takeaways are having the doc as a single source of truth, making sure that we highlight kind of what we're going to work on, have enough questions and enough fleshed out to be able to transfer that into a project for each of these different tasks, and then we can do labels and assignments so that everyone is kind of on the same page. Um, and I think we can definitely do another like core meeting in around 2 weeks or 3 weeks, and then just discuss kind of where we are and how that whole process went. But I'll definitely be a little bit more active on Gitter, kind of making sure that everyone is on the same page, and making sure that there's no knowledge that's lost between us, and that everyone kind of uses the same sources of truth and the same pieces of documentation for their implementation. Right. Cool. Are there any questions or anything anyone else wants to talk about?
sounds good to me. If you could put a calendar invite out early,
Sure.
that's totally my bad. We said 11, then we said 10, and then I sent out for 11. So if we can get that out earlier, I'm less likely to make that mistake.
Sounds good. It's also my bad for not seeing that, the time on the invite. Cool. I will do that. We'll make sure that we have a little bit more structure in that front. So that sounds good to me. So once again, over this week, we're going to be focusing on fleshing out the doc more, getting questions out there, and getting like a task list started with labeled issues so that everyone can kind of focus on what they need to do. And for each label, we'll have specific tasks that are going to be very clear GitHub to-dos. So, for example, like, oh, we need to implement a test for the withdraw method, right? And that'll go into the VMC label for Enrique. And so stuff like that are very clear, like Preston mentioned, and we can just clarify over GitHub threads and then get that done. I think that'll be a really effective workflow. Yeah, let's just do that. So yeah, if there are any sections you want to work on for the doc, feel free to highlight it, and then we can just proceed from there. But yeah, I think just to be clear, like again, like we're just aiming to develop a demo for the community to try out. So if there are any compromises we can take to get that done faster, then let's definitely take that compromise. And if you guys have any questions or or have any thoughts on that, definitely let us know over Gitter. But that's kind of what we're aiming for with our first release. Cool. So, well, thank you everyone for joining. If you guys have any questions, obviously, let's always chat over Gitter. Always available. So, yeah, thanks so much for joining, guys, and yeah, take care, and we'll talk soon.
All right, talk to you later.
All right. Thanks, guys. Talk to you
Thanks.
later.
Bye.
Thanks, guys.
See you guys. Thank you.